Hi everyone. I am Catherine Ellison. I am a member of Sunrise Movement Carroll County. I'm one of the board members actually, and Sunrise Movement is a youth organization dedicated to protecting the environment. This is obviously you are on a panel for Mia Mason, the one, the only. She is running for Maryland District 1. She's amazing. We love her. And today we're going to be talking about her environmental policies. And this is Shane. He is Mia's environmental advisor. Again, we love him. He's great. Today we're just going to be talking about Mia's policies for the environment and what you can expect from her if she is elected. Yeah, so take it away, Mia.
Well, thank you for the wonderful introduction. As everybody knows, that climate recovery plan, and that's mainly because I want to coin that term because we've reached the point where climate change has really affected everyone, and it has to stop. This have to be able to basically go into recovery mode and fix a lot of things that have been messed up the last decade, the last century. So now implement a climate recovery plan, and we're going to be getting into that. So Shane, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, I'll talk about what we can do to sort of mitigate the worst effects, and that's reach 100% clean energy by 2035. And the way MIA plans to do that is pair regulations with subsidies in the electric sector to switch to renewable energies. And that sort of it encourages people with by forcing them with like the carrot and the stick, the stick being regulations and the carrot being subsidies to sort of help people move along and sectors monetarily get into that 100% clean environment energy sector. We can also set standards for fuel and emissions to make our carbon car fleet 100% renewable by 2035, and then also renovate and retrofit buildings to increase efficiency and also build new ones that eliminate fossil fuel use. And if we do that, then we'll be able to just mitigate as much as we can our carbon output and make the effects in the future as survivable as possible. Just every bit we do to keep carbon out of the atmosphere is going to have an effect later down the road, and this plan does that.
And you're absolutely right, Shane, because when we're talking about pairing those subsidies into basically decarbonize everyone by 2035, it's a big task. And what we have to be able to do is work with our state legislators, city councils, chambers of federal agencies in order to chop this up piece by piece in order to actually have an outline to get that done. And when you take a look at all the fuel emissions and everything else, we've increased the amount of gallons, we've going to Paris Climate Accord, something that President Joe Biden will hopefully be able to do as soon as he gets back in office, and then put us back on the track for the globe to help reduce the problems that are growing right now. Because, like for our ozone, for instance, it was super small during the Obama administration. Now it's grown back, and I really need to fix this. And now we've had 10 storms already this year. The last record was 8. So when we take a look at creating these electric fleets and else, we understand, getting rid of other people's prized possessions, antique else. There's still fossil fuels, but this is a pathway forward to transition the next generation, your generation, to purchase and procure electric vehicles. And the thing that we have to do is provide you the infrastructure in order to use that, which requires those regulations, requires those subsidies, requires small businesses to start making the manufacturing parts needed to build the infrastructure and the fleet to help us reduce the fossil fuel. So I think answers my part of it for us to get to the climate recovery plan. While we move into the next section, why don't you take us into that?
Sorry about that. My mic was being a little weird there. Um, so how do you think, in terms of infrastructure, how do you plan on getting us to a much cleaner, more effective way of sustainability? Sorry.
Well, the easy way to kind of do this is understand what type of technology have solar roofs for a lot of families. Bringing those infrastructures up to code. Commercial buildings are able to do this. But a lot of the solar manufacturers and installers around here run into a lot of red tape when they get into a certain kilowatt and having to then tie into the grid. So those are some of the things that we're trying to work with regulators on to be able to add in the energy sector, and that will come at a later time when we're elected, so that we can actually have those sit-down conversations, move some of the red tape, so that we can actually grow our economy and put in the battery storage technology to then have those rechargeable facilities for trucks and vehicles, so that have something to push my. A road just doesn't get built overnight. It takes about 4 to 6 years to plan, and like the Third Bay Bridge, it's been in the works for some time now, and still won't be done on the years from now. So this is definitely doable. We just have to think of it as building bridges within our communities. The goal of it.
Yeah, and just to go off of the solar, the benefits of this investment, they outweigh the inaction. Solar right now is the cheapest energy source that has ever existed in human history. And investing in both the production of solar and also further research will prove to really benefit our society in the future in terms of energy production and climate mitigation.
You're absolutely there. So if you can go on the Costco, Sam's Club, or whatever and find a solar panel there, you can that it's 100 watts. What can you look at it around your house that watts? Laptop, maybe phone chargers, and everything. Having about 10 of them produces a good 1,000 watts. That's enough to do your refrigerator, maybe run your dishwasher, during that time. But we also need to be able to make sure that you have the additional wattage. So we want to make sure that you're 4 to 10,000 watts, sure that you can actually run your entire home for the energy, maybe even run your air conditioning and charge. And then, of course, because you're tied into the grid, you can actually get paid for the energy you're help others in the adopted solar, wind, in their community.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So in terms of the economy and creating jobs, especially for those living locally, what's your plan with that?
Let's get into specifics. So let's try to rephrase that question, since we've already hit some of the broad parts here. Let's go into that. I think we're ready for that. We've put off this whole climate recovery plan a bit, so try to rephrase your question. Got a question?
Yeah, I got it. Mia, wind energy is wind turbine technicians, they're the fastest growing job sector in the US market. What is your plan to incorporate that job growth into Maryland's first congressional district?
Well, we currently have an ocean windmill project with US Wind, and to be able to get them trained and certified requires those electricians and technicians to be able to have something to work on. So we need our iron workers, pipe fitters, and drillers to be out there, but we also need our environment out there to make sure that we provide a coral reef. As far as them being the technician, this is basic. Take a look at it, 10 to 20 wind turbines out there. That's easily about 4 to 6 jobs on a continuous basis, year round, helping our community provide power, and that's about the same amount that you're going to find in a gas turbine plant. So we're basically transitioning those jobs over from fossil fuels over to clean energy.
And how are we going to train all these workers? Like, I don't have any experience in wind turbine building, but if I wanted to become a wind turbine technician, where am I going to get that training? How am I going to learn how to do that?
Well, the corporations are able to provide that. Does it? When does it? And they are able to make sure that you're fully qualified high power generator. I myself, I used to work in a high voltage power plant. This job, I tell you, it requires a lot of safety, a lot of on the job training. So basically, what you're looking at is making sure that we have a program within the community at the college or county councils to make sure that jobs are available through.
And what is the effects that all of these jobs are going to have on the Maryland and national economy at that?
Well, it'll definitely keep our residents in Maryland, besides allowing them to depart, go to where the jobs are, and we'll be able to keep those jobs here. So then the people that are living here don't have to fear or about losing their job anymore. They can have a job and have a steady income for a year without having jobs. This is what we're honestly looking forward to doing for all of our Marylanders.
And while we're on the topic of infrastructure, do you want to talk a little bit about your plan of retrofitting buildings to be more environmentally sustainable? Is your plan to build entirely new buildings, or is it to retrofit? What do you plan on doing?
Well, we have two aspects of this. We have buildings that need to be retrofitted. We have some that fall into the category of the historical preservation. So they may not be allowed to do solar, they're allowed to do wind, but their neighboring may be able to do. So it is something about keeping a preservation and making a monumental history shift for something that is preserved as a historical record. As far as an older building and bringing them up to code, that's something simple to do, especially when you have a tenant or new lease agents, that is a part of the contract that they lease or purchase to make sure that the councils can make sure this is enforced so that they're no longer required to have a utility produce power. Will then save the county some revenue. As far as like new buildings, it's about making sure that they're up to code and provide,
Interesting. And then, what is the federal government's role? Like, if you were in Congress, what would you be doing to support constructing buildings that are able to withstand the effects of a changing climate? Like, we've already had 10 storms this season already. What are you going to do in Congress to sort of prepare for more intense storms, longer seasons, flooding, droughts?
well, making sure that the FEMA is fully funded, fully staffed. They were slashed and cut during this administration, and they weren't prepared. The president made a little tour of all of his political stunts, throwing toilet papers and towels around, and then still had to wait 18 months to 24 months to even get approval or apply because they didn't have internet, they didn't have power, or they didn't have all the required documents and red tape in order to get through it. So basically, the FEMA became a runaround game. So it wasn't very productive, and a lot of people lost their business, their homes, their families. So we need to be able to actually protect that and make it easier for those who already have their established buildings by having it in our database. Just like any other insurance provider has, they can just simply transfer all of that information and automatically apply grants or recovery bonds and bonuses, loans that we can provide to rebuild a community after an. I think that would honestly be a smoother transition for the entire, not only from the east, but anyone south of us.
Yeah, and so while we're on the topic of infrastructure, it most people don't think of it in the same category, but natural buffers like marshlands and forests also mitigate the effects of rising seawaters and storms. Do you have a plan in place to use those to protect our shorelines and communities?
Absolutely. So part of the windmill project is those coral reefs, those man-made islands. like we have with Popular Island House. These actually provide wildlife sanctuaries, places of commerce and business, bird watching, which provides tourism. There's a lot of options to protect our channels for our fishermen, provide more opportunities for clean water by removing the pollutants that are on the bottom of Chesapeake Bay and the rivers by putting them onto a place where they actually decompose properly without decomposing in the water. So in this, that part of that climate recovery plan actually make sure that we bulk up the shoreline. It will really help our community so that they can fight that sea and fight that rising sea level. I remember growing up when I was a kid in Virginia Beach, and they were like rainbowing the beach back on and put on like 400 feet, and they were so proud of it. But like 2 years later, a hurricane came by and took half of it. So that's a lot of wasted money. But still, when it comes down to making sure that we have a beach for our tourism on both sides in the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean, these are something that we honestly need to, help our community recover during this pandemic. Make sure that in 2021 they can actually have tourism and at 100%.
So the Chesapeake Bay, on the topic of natural buffers and the health of the bay, the watershed spans all the way up to New York. In Congress, what is your role going to be, and how are you going to effectively bring the states together, even states that don't have a necessary stake in the bay, to work together to ensure its health?
I think they've already leaped ahead of me on this one because Virginia, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Maryland have sued the EPA. So it's about making sure that we're with our other congressional representatives and standing up with our AG and saying our EPA needs, and regardless of what river the pollution comes from, different state, different county, we hold whoever's polluting accountable. And it's not going to be a voluntary reporting. It's going to be an actual monitoring reporting, so that the fine will definitely go into that county, pay for things, clean up the recovery, and of course make sure that the EPA also are able to find those who are polluting watershed.
Sounds good. And a comment from Tina earlier, she said another option is incremental sustainability in existing structures. That would include things like LED lighting and existing solutions, high efficiency variable speed HVAC upgrades, etc. These provide new employment opportunities for existing skilled trade professionals. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely correct. When I came into this place, everything was still incandescent and mercury bulbs, the CFL bulbs. So we switched those out to LEDs, and we saw our energy bill drop in half. So it was super exciting to see the power of an LED, help out our community. As far as like all the HVAC upgrades and everything else, getting that 95 to 96% efficiency, awesome. Especially if you're still living with, a boiler, a furnace. Yes, those provide 80 to 88 and 92% efficiency. But comes to this day and age, a heat pump can honestly do the same thing as an air conditioner can, because they're basically the same thing and provide the same efficiency. It's about making sure that you also have a good air handler to clean your air, because now we have pollutants coming in all the way from California. So families have a lot of time to save up this winter, and instead of getting Christmas presents, get a new HVAC unit.
While we're on the topic of upgrading existing appliances, what are your thoughts on the EPA's STAR and LEED programs for structures?
I would have to look into that. That's something I really haven't put a lot of thought into. So you will have to definitely dive into that after this.
Okay. And Brian Chan, he also brought up, thanks for bringing this up. Different states and counties are working unequally to depollute the Chesapeake Bay, and it's good to hear that you unite with other representatives in building up a mandatory reporting.
It is. We have folks that I used to work with who had to report for different companies all across different states. And some of the other states are way more relaxed than Maryland. So it's about making sure that we actually have a monitoring system in each of these facilities that provide pollution into our bay or have some type of runoff. This is something that, I don't want to put a detriment onto our farmers, but when we think about that, we to go to the city councils and their local leaders and say, hey, instead of it going into the river, can we just give them the infrastructure and the sewage, which we can help them out with? I think that would be another way to divert it so that it actually goes to a treatment plant and not to our bay or river.
Yeah.
And it protects
And
our aquifers as well.
you see a lot of progress of this being made in recent history in terms of environmental protections and regulations from both local and federal governments.
Oh, yes. Whenever there's road construction, you can see the new ways that they're doing things in order to make sure that we don't have this runoff into the Chesapeake Bay. Even they're going LEED certified to make sure that things are going to last beyond 40 years, which is beautiful to see because that means we'll have it for another generation before we have to look at getting it replaced again. And even when we take old infrastructure and we upgrade it, we change it, it's now able to last over a whole century. So that's given us more life expectancy than we ever expected because we're using new, better materials because of the technology we're using right now, which is more green. I think that's going to really help us because then we're reducing the harm of creating these products also in the manufacturing process, which then reduces that pollution as well. So we've started with basically the manufacturing side all the way down to the time it gets installed and used on a daily basis. So we have to thank a lot of scientists and a lot of engineers who have put a lot of thought into this. And then to make sure our communities and their families are protected for the next century.
You're totally right. And I think sometimes when we talk about climate change and the climate catastrophe and mitigating it, what we don't talk about is the American know-how and ingenuity that really is powering the solution. I mean, we look all across the country and there's millions of Americans who are innovating, building technology and researching different ways to protect their communities. And that's a crucial part of the plan to mitigate climate change. So to go back to regulations, what are your stances on the lifting of Obama era EPA regulations like the methane rule? In Congress, how are you gonna react?
You mean lift them up, like remove them?
Or the
That's what you said.
Trump administration's
Oh,
lifting
okay.
up them?
So we need to restore the Obama era environmental protections that put us on a guideline for 2030, 2040, 2050, so that we can safeguard our water and protect a lot of the products that we have here, which are byproducts in our waterways from cattle farmers, cow farmers, chicken farmers. If it lives, it poops. So that methane pollution runoff also affects our air, and this is another reason for us to try to get rid of fossil fuels as well, because we have sulfur dioxide, which normally isn't reported that much, or carbon monoxide. So we need to be able to get those on a safe level for humans, so that we can actually make sure that we have cash crops that actually suck up all that carbon and all those pollutants, because our trees are very toxic right now, and then when that goes into the soil, it makes the ground even more toxic. And then as those new plants grow, they're providing fruits and vegetables for all the woodland animals, and then their bodies are suffering from that toxicity as well. So we have to complete this full cycle of reducing that pollution. I'm looking forward to doing it by 2035 by reinstalling all of those Obama era protections so that we can continue to make our earth greener, skies bluer, versus the forest fires and the orange and purple skies we've had.
Totally, 100%. So the forest fires in California, they've affected just about every American in the continent. We can even see the haze 3,000 miles away. Does every American feel the effects of climate change the same?
I think that's in their own mindset. When you think about it, if you hop in your car every day and you turn on the AC, just like Sarah, she's not that aware of climate change. But when you go outside and it's always brighter, always this, always that, always like warmer to you than what it used to be, like, hey, normally by Thanksgiving you used to have snow. Now we're getting snow in January and everything else. And yes, to you out there who don't like snow, I said it. But maybe on election day we'll have snow. Who knows? But climate change is real. It just dramatically affects. Nobody really had an education of what climate was, especially when it came to El Nino, El Nana. And how this actually affects us in our solar system. I mean, like a couple hundred years ago, everybody thought the world was still flat, and we still had people form groups that say that the world was flat. And it's just not right. We're kind of an egg-shaped oblong circling around the solar system here, around the sun, and then through the universe itself. So there's a lot of other variables in here that people aren't aware of that affect climate change, including our magnetic spheres. I'm not going to give the whole scientific term. I'm not going to try to geek out tonight. This is going to try to keep this general. But even our North Pole has shifted, which has kind of shifted our equator and has shifted our jet streams and shifted our weather. And that's because we've changed so much in the last 50 years. It's really devastated the entire ecosystem of our planet. So we have to come up with a climate plan and get us back on track to coexist with the only place that we can live, Earth.
Yeah. And to talk specifically to voters in the first congressional district in the Eastern Shore, what specific resources will you provide in Congress to help mitigate and adapt to changing climates on our Eastern Shore?
Well, I think that as a person who can provide legislation, that would really help us out. Work with the local EPA, work with the local natural resources officers in order to protect what we have here on the Chesapeake, protect what we have here on the coast, protect it from pipelines, protect it from all of the devastations of world transit that comes through our Chesapeake Bay on a daily basis. We need to be able to take care of our communities, and that's one of the things that we can do in Congress. And we have to be able to be engaged with the communities, the Sierra clubs, and everyone else to make sure that if you have a voice, it's heard. And we move this legislation forward. And this is why I'm so glad that with Sunrise Movement, we can make sure that the sun still rises on the Eastern Shore so that our farmers have something to grow.
Yeah. And you mentioned pipelines. Do you want to talk about the Delmarva pipeline a little bit?
Well, we don't need it. I see the economic benefits of it, but it's short term. When you take a look at the time it may be completed and used, by 2035, we're going to be all electric. So what good is it going to honestly do besides harm our environment even further? So stand with us, vote this November, and make sure that we don't get it. Because it's only a temporary solution, and most of it's natural gas, and that came from fracking. We know how devastating fracking is, and it affects our aquifers, which means that it's changing even more. It's putting pollutions right into our natural water supplies, and we can't continue building reservoirs and dams in order to, have clean water, because things get into that. Environment, air, and water leaches into it, which affects what we drink. And of course, we can't just have like tons and tons of RO filters in order to make it perfect, pure water, because we still have to put minerals back into it. So not having a pipeline will benefit our community because we're on a transition to clean energy by 2035.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And fracking and natural gas, it may be marketed as clean energy, but in the relative scheme of things, it's not clean. You're still burning it. You're still putting chemicals into the ground that go into our water and our farms and our animals and then our food, and also carbon into the atmosphere, which just heats up the environment even more. And the solutions are here in wind, solar, geothermal, nuclear. It's just the interest is in fracking. That's where the big money is, but the power is really in the voters to emphasize that we don't want fracking. We want actual clean energy. And at least for me, that's what gives me hope, is that It's not money that guarantees what my future is going to be powered off of. It's my vote. Mia, what gives you hope about the climate and environment?
Well, I think it's about people changing their mindset, understanding what we're going through to make sure that these things are. We have some starch advocates that even say that U.S. wind is going to be doing the same thing that offshore drilling is going to be doing. And I have to say that, to them, it's to put something permanent in place that gives back to the environment. If you take a look at the history of what has happened, we have more oil spill documentaries than we actually do documentaries on wind energy and solar energy or wave energy. So, with all the oil spills that happen with offshore drilling, what do you think is safer? It's going to be wind energy. And what we can do is actually help protect our eastern shore from, erosion as well, so that we can keep those beaches and provide more wildlife, which also gives us more fishermen to have more coastline to have a natural resource to feed us. So if you like seafood like I do, help them out and give them something to grow and give them something to fish for and then something for us to feed our families with. So we have to have that aquatic and land biodiversity to bring back that beautiful part of the natural part of the Chesapeake Bay. And that allows us to continue to sail on it, continue to have recreation on it. It helps those natural resource officers understand exactly what's going on with the land when it starts to become deforested, or the swamps actually start to rise above the roads because of tidal flooding. There's a lot that happens here on the eastern shore, and it's right there in front of you. You just have to actually open your eyes and see it without having to drive by it. So this is why it's always amazing to take the back roads and get to know more about you and your community. And the best way to protect it is to get involved in it.
Yeah. And before we give any final thoughts, I'm going to ask the audience, what gives you hope? What are things in your community that you wish to see change? And what are the solutions to these changes? And while those are coming in, Mia, any final thoughts you have on environment, Maryland's first congressional district?
Well, I think we've covered a lot. We've covered out pretty much our goal lines for what we're going to do, how we're going to accomplish some of these, what we're going to provide as enforcement standards. I think one of the best things that we can do is bring back these rules that protect our communities and enhance them so that they can't easily be wiped away with an executive order by the next president. But it's also up to our state leaders and our local council members in order to make sure that what we provide as legislation is also on the state level and the county levels to make sure that if we are holding everyone accountable for climate. So those are my final thoughts. And if you ever need anything further, I recommend y'all go to miadmason.us, send us a message, and if it's environmental related, I'll be sending it to Shane. But if you want a direct question, just call us 410-94-MASON.
Yep. And here's something from Brian. He said, here in Hartford and Cecil counties, we take pride in the Conowingo Dam. It's not the least intrusive energy source, but it gives us hope to move beyond fossil fuels. Thank you, Brian.
That is true. And more than likely, they're still trying to repair it and keep it going, which means that it's normal one-way traffic. But I have to say, it's nicer to go that way than city on 95. So it's beautiful to see the scenic parts, and when it's low tide, it's nice to just be able to go out there and walk among the rocks, especially from the state park. So definitely enjoyable to be out there with the dam. Imagine if that dam wasn't there. You would probably have more flooding, a lot of other things happening, and no power, which means that over there by the Vulcan plant, we'd probably need a power plant. So think about this. This is how we get things to stay green and go green.
Well, folks, you heard it here. Mia has a plan. The solutions are here, and she knows exactly what to do to make sure that our heritage, our environment, and our futures are protected. Tina just sent in. On the Midshore, please visit Chesapeake College, home of a large solar array, and a LEED Platinum building, and 18, soon to be 19, groundwater remediation projects.
Good, awesome. Well, definitely contact us, Tina, so that we can arrange a visit. I'd love to be able to do that. I've gone to several farms and looked at their megawatt projects, and it's remarkable about what they're able to do. And it's easy to see that a maintenance technician only has to be able to go check voltages once or twice a month and then make sure that they're clean and not damaged. But we also want to make sure that we're not replacing them with robots in the future. So thank you. Tina, definitely send us a message.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Shane was our host. I don't know exactly what happened, Catherine. Our rural internet is a big issue out here, so hopefully we can get elected and get that fixed for her. So with that, everybody have a wonderful night and enjoy your time. Make sure you vote for us or donate at miadmason.com/donate. Bye everybody. Good night.
Great night.